perhaps you've missed out on the week, do not worry, we have your back here on Morning Express. If you've just joined us, my panel this morning, Philip Magal, who is an advocate and governance expert, Kevin Osido. Gentlemen, again, thank you for your time, and thank you for being here on KTN News. Let's just jump straight into this issue of cooking. So, according to Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i, he says that mercury was just a precocious term that he was using. I'm not sure that would have been the right adjective to use then in such a scenario. But now here's the thing. After yesterday's appearance, finally, he says fertilizer, cooking oil, fruit juice, tomato ketchup in the market could be containing heavy metals that are harmful to human beings. So we don't have to worry anymore about sugar. We just now have to worry about fertilizer, cooking oil, fruit juice, amongst other things, containing heavy metals. Kevin, it's good to have you here with us.
Shukran.
So what do you think about this?
Accountability. That one, people should be able to say words which they can be able to defend and stand by. And two is the place of care for the citizens of a government. Because if you talk about things like cooking oil, these are basic necessities for a family. Sugar is, Kenyans love tea like nothing else, you know, like we do love our politics. And so things which, in my view, really mean a lot to Kenyans should also mean quite some, should also mean a lot to the government. And that, therefore, should, in my view, provide opportunities for the government to be able to exercise its governance systems and mechanisms. And that brings me to the third point, which is, what is it that the government has that can be able to test whether what Kenyans are consuming is poisonous or improper? And so that therefore presents in institutions that are charged with the responsibility of ensuring that whatsoever elements we import into this country are safe, secure, and that there are things that Kenyans can be able to use, either consume or sell or buy in a manner that then makes the government also confident that its security and safety for the citizens is one that both the government can be proud of and the citizens can also be comfortable. And so if we listen to people like CS for Interior, who is therefore in charge of national coordination and government and the security of the citizens, changing his words left, right, and center, in my view, it really brings in lots of concerns and questions for the citizens, to the extent that, what is it there for? And the fourth thing probably would be investigations. Would we be able to have timelines for when some of these tests will be able to be done and completed? Yes, we've had very high-level arrests at Kenya Bureau of Standards. What does that mean, and what is happening right now? And when can Kenyans then be comfortable that, all right, the case is closed, and that the oil that we are now buying, the sugar we are consuming, ketchup, you walk into many of these restaurants, and what you see on the tables is really what Kenyans enjoy putting onto their food. And so I think for me, government security and that of its citizens presents a key concern.
And it also begs the question, be it fertilizer, or the cooking oil, or the fruit juice, or tomato ketchup, how long ago are we going to consume products that have been on our shelves for 6 months? And if so, how long are we going to consume them until then we have a clean batch of clean products within our shelves? But then, Philip, this speaks volume. Before we even take a look at our standards in the market, this speaks volume already about our security within our borders, would you not say? Because it begs the question, how are these harmful products? They're not illegal to import, but they are harmful in the sense they would cause health disaster, God forbid, even death. To some extent.
It's not just the imported stuff, right. Even that which is being made within the country. Remember, somebody was caught in Nakuru the other day selling people very funny samosas, and he says he's been doing so for the last 7 years.
Oh my gosh.
First of all, I'd like to thank Matiang'i for being candid with us and telling us that everything around us is poisoned, be it water, be it sugar, be it the coffee that we take. Secondly, he confirmed what we've always suspected. You know, every time I tear a packet of coffee, I ask myself, is this thing really coffee? I mean, where is this? Is this from Kariobangi, or is it really from Nestle? Every time I buy a toothpaste, I really wonder, is this the original thing, or am I using some chalk and dust within? That is how perilous it is being a Kenyan. I mean, you eat a samosa, you go anywhere, you know, you have to ask yourself, is this really chicken that I'm eating?
But Philip, let me challenge you a little bit.
Yes.
was CS Matiang'i being candid with Kenyans? Because he came out and said it was mercury. Only a week or so later to hear, okay, it's not mercury, it's actually lead. Now for him to come out and say, okay, I didn't mean to use the term mercury, that was just an alternative text. It speaks volume.
My presumption has been that the government, of course, knew that there was no mercury in this particular, in the sugar, but then they had to heighten the people's awareness of the problems that we are facing. And of course, they had to tell us, whatever it is that you're consuming has mercury. Basically, what they were saying is whatever it is that you're consuming is really, really dangerous. and you have to back us in this particular fight. It was, to me, it was part of government propaganda, but I would call it positive propaganda in this sense that, of course, you have to win the people over if at all you are to win this fight. Secondly, to me, there really is no big difference between mercury and lead. Either way, both or one of them would take you to the grave. So therefore, basically, when he came out yesterday and said, no, it is not only in your sugar, but it is in your ketchup, it is in your coffee, it is... To me, that was another level of candidness. And, you know, at some point, you have to look people in the eye and tell them, now, look, the fight is bigger than you thought. The perils are much more serious than we anticipated at the beginning. Of course, I might have misled you on the sugar, but then the danger is still there.
But let's also not forget that Matiang'i and his counterpart, Aden, were on different terms on this. Same government, but were singing different songs in the aspect of, does it have mercury, does it not have mercury? Did Matiang'i do the testing for him to say that, yes, we are coming out with a report that is backed with lab experiments to show that the sugar that is coming in has mercury. Kevin, this whole would now, the fact that we're seeing Matiang'i is saying that it didn't have mercury, that it's now cooking oil, ketchup, and juice that are unsafe. Would he be taking a step back because he sort of stepped on live wire that he wasn't supposed to?
I think one of the things that we need to be careful about is the politicization of this narrative, whether it is true or false. But I think there has been lots of politics, which then brings in the aspect of the two cabinet secretaries standing on different, on the same platform, but facing different sides and speaking, should more or less be speaking for the same government. And so that politicization then brings in the question of who is it that we can be able to believe. And I think then it is incumbent upon the government to have the believability levels of its people quite high, so that then the government can be able to have a moral authority to stand and safeguard its citizens. Because I think for me, the biggest question here is that of security and safety for the citizens, whether it is imported or it's exported or it's locally made. And we have very huge brands in this country, Buy Kenya, Sell Kenya, you know, made in Kenya and all this. What does this mean to the citizens themselves? And then the other thing, in my view, is this is not the first time that we are having this happen. We've had discussions around fake fertilizers in the past, coming all the way from 2003, when the first time the government came into government. We went on to, and the question then, in my view, is why is it that always after an election we have such a huge scandal of contraband goods and fake things happening in this country? What is it that we are not doing right that makes it keep repeating itself? Is it a government gap that therefore needs to be filled? Is it a systemic issue that therefore needs to be looked into? What is it that we are not doing as a country or as a people or as an institution of government? So that then we have people who are tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that Kenyans are having the right goods coming in and going out of the country, doing their work. I applaud the arrest of directors at KEBS, but again, this is not the first time it is happening.
Do you think KEBS is overwhelmed?
Yes and no. Because government should be able to have capacity to do its work. So it is, if it is overwhelmed, we have budgets that are being read every year. And the people who sit at the helm of KEBS should be able to communicate and speak to government so that what needs to be done is done. And no, because I think that a government should also be able to really have mechanisms from a governance perspective to be able to perform. But I am saying this because, again, if you look at almost all the entry points of our country, we have... You see, the thing is, every day, things come into this country. The ones that attract media attention, that get to the newspapers, and the ones that get to electronic media like television, is what we talk about. But if you go to many of our border counties, every day you have arrests of fake things coming into this country. Some of them are never reported. And therefore, this, in my view, presents the question of how can we therefore be able to ensure that we, one, strengthen our borders, and that, two, we strengthen the laws that are supposed to safeguard Kenyans and Kenya. So the bigger picture to me is, what is it that we are not doing right that makes this keep repeating itself? And I am looking forward to, as a normal Kenyan, really following up on these arrests, and therefore to be able to look at whether there is anything that we are learning out of it, and whether it can inform the future about engagement with this kind of malpractices.
Gentlemen, Philip, as I'm just hold on to your thought, I want to bring your attention to something still on the same issue. If you look at page 14 this morning of the Daily Nation, the picture of the day, it paints for you a clear image where we are as a nation when it comes to this sugar saga. You have Matiang'i on one side saying, let's go this way. This is the aspect of the sugar. And then you have Aden, who is saying, no, let's move this way. So in the middle, you have Kenya. Philip, as you're about to add your comments on what Kevin has said, where does this leave the individuals? Where does this leave Kenyans when we don't know what's happening?
When the government is speaking from both sides of its mouth.
Yes.
I think it tells you of, basically it highlights the failures within our government. For me, I think CS Adan Mohammed was basically trying to protect cover his own back, because KEBS falls squarely under his ministry, and therefore any failings within KEBS would have been directly attributed to him. But he should have consulted Matiang'i before he spoke, and if necessary, then they should have issued a joint statement. But then it tells you where we stand as a country. And just to add to what Kevin said on KEBS, I think KEBS has capacity. It's only that it's corrupt. And it's good that these people are arraigned in court, arrested on a Friday. I like that because, it's usually the Chang'a people and the Mama Pimas who are arrested on Friday and kept in cells over the weekend, because they cannot be granted bail and arraigned in court on Monday, so that they can feel what Kenyans feel. We are being told that fake KEBS slips are being sold within KEBS premises. Any good, before any good come into the country, they have to be inspected at the port. Yesterday, we had an incident where a whole ship turned back and, and went and docked in Malawi. It tells you it is the simple things that should be done that are not being done. Let us get onto the ship. Let us take a sample. And we'll tell you whether or not we are offloading these things. You could see the people that were arrested. And these are the people, these are the culprits, these are the people who are complicit in all of this trade. And if more than 1 million tons of sugar was illegally imported or imported into the country without being tested, it tells you how much money these people make. And they must be held responsible, whether or not it is that they do have capacity.
Speaking of parties that are involved or have their share with this sugar saga, one is Rai, who owns quite a number of businesses here in Kenya, and his company has been named a few of times. He was part of the grilling that happened yesterday. But when I think of Rai, I'm also reminded of the Gupta's family in South Africa, quite a very wealthy family in terms of business. And Kevin, I'd love for you to paint for Kenyans an image of how business influences politics, because I don't think we understand that, or that we downplay it, but how business really goes to influence politics within a country.
Very good question. And when you look at the relationship between the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, for instance, and the government, it is one very close relationship, which is much more closer than any other relationship, even that of the religious leaders, the civil society, the media, and quite a number of other sectors. And that, therefore, in my view, presents a very good picture of what the business community means to a politician. And what this means is, for instance, when you get into politics, you need bankrolling, you need resources, you need financing to be able to campaign. And for some of us who've been a little bit closer to how politics is done in this country, you know that there is no politician who will not gamble. I mean, there is no businessman who will not gamble with a politician. So you want to be able to be seen to be favorable to whichever side. So when we have elections, people are campaigning, and you have delegations of business people meeting the sitting government or meeting an opposition which is a government in waiting. The second thing, which a businessman, so the politician will be keen to be able to receive support in terms of financial or financial resource for campaigns. The business person is interested in a very amicable business environment, which the only person who can be able to guarantee this is the government. So you need that. You need to be comfortable that the laws are going to be supportive of your government, the legislations, regulations that are going to be, fronted by this government. You also want to be sure about your security, that there will be no thuggeries going on, there will be no insecure practices that will then be able to really affect your government. The third thing is the investment sector or the investors, the investment community, who are really concerned about profit making, and they're also concerned about security, as I've already said. So these sectors, therefore, to a normal citizen, you might not see that happening, because the business person is really interested in the overtness of how comfortable is the environment for me, are the laws responsive, is the government able to ensure that I just do my business and it is okay. The citizen, who is you and I and a few of us who are watching this segment, is our interest is the government able to ensure that I have an environment that will also be able to ensure that I have food and money in my pocket. When that is not met, then we begin to see lots of what we are seeing happening in Kenya today. Because if you have been keen even to look at how the budget, which was just read a few days ago, what the experts in budgeting say about what this means, there is a lot of talk about, one, the Big Four agenda, but no one is telling us what this Big Four mean to the normal citizen. So the people who feel comfortable around discussions of what investment opportunities, what financial resources we are going to make out of the Big Four, for example, housing projects, those are the people who are out there talking. But no one is telling the citizen what exactly 800 units per year of housing will mean to that common citizen. So ours is really not about money into our pockets and food and all that. It's about, will I be able to live for tomorrow, and are my kids safe when they're walking to school? But again, the second thing, so that maybe Philip can also respond, is that ample and amicable environment. The people who are talking about it are the people who feel that they have greater stakes, and that really is informed at the political stage. The normal citizen, and in Kenya, for instance, we don't have people contributing monies for campaigns. For example, if I want to run for governor of Nairobi, you don't see Nairobians meeting to contribute towards their preferred candidate. The business community, they meet, and that is what they do. So they do their scenarios, they look at who is the best, the best bet towards winning the seat for Nairobi. So when a governor is elected, say for instance in Nairobi County, the word cartel is not new. There are people who therefore want to come and, one, defend their support for you as a governor, and they are also interested in their returns. And as I said earlier on, the return is about security, and two is about, is the county government going to ensure that the laws that you're making, so that if it is cess, taxes, and even parking fees and all that, if I have a whole industrial area, I have 8 lorries at industrial area, will I be paying 300 shillings for each of those lorries, or what does it mean for me as someone who has campaigned? So when cartels feel threatened by the sitting government, then all these issues, including these things we are talking about, corruption, fake goods, so that you destabilize, in my view, from what we have seen happening in other countries, are sitting government. But it is not anything that is unique. It is not just freshly happening in Kenya today. It has happened before. The big question is, are we learning about it, and how can, as citizens, organize ourselves and stop agonizing over things which we have control over?
Philip, your thoughts on how business influences politics?
Yeah, you've raised a very good comparison. That is between the Guptas in South Africa and Jacob Zuma, and the situation prevailing in the country right now. The most, what this highlights is, number one, campaign financing. Number two, we have the issue of money laundering, and number three is, the powers that our politicians do have, and the issues of abuse of office. It is important, and we do have the laws in place which regulate campaign financing. It is at this point that these businessmen do come in and buy off our politicians. Some people are able to make really, really big contributions which are not made known to the public. Therefore, we cannot know the connection between those in government and these businessmen. Number two, we have money laundering, which is a big factor as well in this country, because once the politicians steal, they need to channel this money through legit or credible venues. And that is where, again, these big businessmen come in. And lastly is abuse of office, influence peddling, and other forms of corruption that manifest like they did last year, whereby we had the Treasury issuing a very, very funny Gazette notice in which it allowed anybody in this country to import any amount of sugar they wanted within a window of 3